Everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to look at Dietland, Sarai Walker's book. That is probably, I think this is going to be the most recent book that we are looking at. I think it came out after Educated, not sure. But at any rate, there's a lot going on in this book that is quite relevant today because it is so recent. So in this lecture, we're going to look at kind of a summary and overview of the plot. And then in the next two lectures, we're going to examine some of the themes. So let's get started. A structural metaphor. So before I start talking about the plot itself, it's kind of important to know how this story is structured. A structural metaphor occurs when one new or complex concept, here this story in this book, Plum's journey, is presented in terms of some other, usually a more concrete concept. In this case, the new metaphor, or the new concept, I misspoke there. The new concept is Dietland, the book, and Plum's journey. And the concrete concept that we already kind of know and can relate to is Alice in Wonderland. So the novel uses Alice in Wonderland in some ways to kind of mirror Plum's journey through her world. Plum's real name is Alicia, kind of like Alice. The chapters have titles like Rabbit Hole and Eat Me. Similar to Alice, Alicia, who from now on will really be referring to as Plum, that's how she refers to herself. But Alicia follows a trail leading to a strange new world. So there are little clues. There is a character, Lita, who kind of is like the White Rabbit, somebody who is chasing Plum, who then Plum chases. And she goes into this new world and has these discoveries that change her. So at first she's intrigued by her new world, and then she's kind of confused by it. Like Alice, Alicia feels unable to control her body, whether that means growing or shrinking. So I have this little picture of Alice in Wonderland here with the Drink Me bottle. In the book, Alice in Wonderland, a little bit different than the cartoon Disney version that a lot of people are familiar with. But in both of those, she grows and shrinks, and these are very confusing to her. In the book, she meets people who don't make sense, and she has to sort of figure out and learn how to navigate her way through. And that's a little bit what happens to Plum as well. So that's kind of how the author set it up, but it's not a direct comparison to Alice in Wonderland. It's not like a modern retelling. It's just a way that the story is structured. So getting into the actual story, this is a quote from the author. I asked myself, why are fat women so hated? And I didn't know the answer to that. That's where I started writing the novel Dietland. Alicia, again known as Plum, writes for a glossy women's magazine. So if you think of something like Cosmo or Vogue or Shape, I guess, would be another one. 17 magazine, and Marie Claire, which I think just closed. So at any rate, she writes for part of the beauty industry, a beauty magazine. She's a ghostwriter for the magazine's publisher, Kitty. So people write into Kitty. All of these girls write into Kitty, and Alicia from her apartment answers their letters as if she is Kitty answering this fan mail. While offering advice to these young female readers, she really is almost a recluse. She's hiding out from the world. She's in her apartment. She doesn't have much contact with the outside world. She has one friend, Carmen, who runs a cafe. She sometimes works there, but she doesn't cook or bake. And she goes to diet meetings and she goes to doctor appointments, and sometimes she has to go into work, but that's pretty much it. So, the story starts with her at age 29. She's been dieting her entire life, but she's over 300 pounds, and she really doesn't believe that she's worthy I wrote this kind of wrong here, to be engaged in the world. She doesn't think that she's worthy enough to engage with people. Again, one friend, no love life. There's kind of some talk about her previous attempts at having a love life that didn't work out. She's really very isolated. And she just dreams of being thin. She saves every dollar of her salary for bariatric weight loss surgery. She thinks about Alicia, which is her real name, but she thinks of Alicia almost as this separate person, the thin person inside of her that could finally be free and finally be loved and be worthy. And that happens, I put before the rabbit hole, because that happens before she starts journeying into this different world and goes on a different path. So this is a picture from the TV show, and we're going to watch a clip of that in a moment. And then I'll talk about that then. But this is a depiction of Plum holding up a dress that she would like to wear someday. Plum has almost saved enough money to fund her weight loss surgery, and she realizes someone's been following her. She confronts this woman, Lita, who responds by handing her a book entitled The Adventures in Dietland. And then Lita runs away. I put she disappears. Sounds like she goes puff up into smoke, but she runs away. The author of this book is Verena Baptist, the daughter of a self-proclaimed weight loss expert. When the person who founded the company, when she died, Verena closed the company and then wrote this expose, this tell-all about her mother, about the diet program, about and really against the diet industry as a whole. After that, when Plum reads this book, she realizes that she was one of these exploited women. As a teen, she put all of her faith and money into this Baptist diet plan. It left her quite ill. It left her with more eating problems, as it seems to have done to many different people. And essentially, at the end of the book that Plum is reading, to right her mother's wrongs and to kind of fix things a little bit for a few number of people that she can, Verena started this place called Calliope House. It's a women's collective that's focused on empowering women. So almost like a commune. Calliope is pictured there. She is a muse in Greek mythology. The muses help to inspire people, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Calliope was the muse of all of the muses, if that makes sense. So that's why the house is named after her. It's a source of inspiration for people. When Plum goes to Calliope House, it's kind of a safe place filled with women working on these different projects. Some of them are just to affect their own lives, and others are to have a bigger global impact. So there are women writing books, there are women doing sort of PhD type research projects, and then there are people like Plum who are there to kind of work on themselves. Another person, Julia, is there, who's trying to take down Austin Media, which owned the magazine that Plum worked for. There we go. Julia has a PhD in women's studies, and she's really working from within the fashion industry to undermine the damaging promotion of unrealistic beauty standards. So if you can think about things like photoshopping models on covers, plastic surgery, so many other things that we're going to go into later. I don't want to get on it right here, but another woman is doing a project on pornography and the degradation of women in the porn industry, as well as media as a whole. And there's a few other things as well. So Verena offers Plum $20,000 to complete her new Baptist plan before proceeding with the bariatric surgery. And so she says, look, if this doesn't work for you, you have $20,000 that you can use for the surgery. And if it does work for you, then you still have the money. That's essentially what happens. So she gives her 5 challenges to compel her to start living life, the life that she was reserving for Alicia, her post-weight loss self. And Plum eventually accepts the offer, but it's not an easy transition. She really kind of fights Verena on some of the changes, and she begins to change in ways that she didn't expect. It seems initially almost like she thinks that this is kind of going to be like a diet program that will help her lose the weight in a different way, and it's not. It's looking at her emotions, her sexuality, her mental state, and the challenging the things that she believes, so her spirituality in that sense as well. Meanwhile, a series of news reports and interludes interrupt Plum's first-person narrative, and I think this is the part of the book that really has gotten the most attention, besides possibly the woman doing the pornography project, but certainly it is a bit more graphic. But it kind of was inspired by the book Fight Club that the author has said. I read that book and I thought there needs to be something like this for women. Fight Club is a lot about male rage and economic issues, I guess, to a certain extent, feeling disaffected by society. But she wanted to have something that really was kind of similar to that, but for women. So in these reports, we hear of a vigilante or possibly a domestic terrorist group called Jennifer. And Jennifer is trying to avenge the injustices suffered by women. As one example, that kind of kicks things off early in the book, the bodies of two men are stuffed into bags and thrown from a highway overpass. Inside their mouths are cards that read Jennifer. Both men were accused rapists who were pretty much, it's clear that they were guilty, but they went unpunished. And throughout the course of the novel, Jennifer's reign of terror includes killing and abducting rapists, threatening violence to coerce media to stop objectifying women, broadcasting names of potential future targets. In some ways, the group really represents a more militant, violent version of the anger that Plum feels for the way that society has abused and rejected her. In other ways, I don't have this word here and I wish I did, but Plum's journey is almost like a microcosm of this larger global issue about how women are viewed, objectified, and treated. And we're going to talk about that in the next lecture when I get into themes. But I think that it's kind of important to note that this really is almost in the margins of the novel, meaning that it's put in here and there, and eventually there is a connection directly to Plum and her story, but it's not as prominent as it was in the TV series, where that really was a much bigger plot point that kind of dovetailed with Plum's journey. The TV series lasted one season, and as far as the summary goes, this is kind of it. I don't want to spoil too much for you guys. I don't want to tell exactly what Plum does on her journey or how things are connected to Jennifer, because that's something I would like you to discover on your own. But the TV show, which we're going to look at an excerpt in just a second, it lasted one season, and I think one of the reasons for that is that they made some pretty significant changes from the book. Necessarily so, because it's on TV, but and they have to kind of heighten things. I wish really that they had done it as a short form TV show. I think that if they had done it as a 10 episode series, like on Netflix possibly, or even AMC, which aired it, it may have gone better to kind of show Plum's entire journey. As it was, there were some changes. The isolation of Plum wasn't as clear. the violence plays a much more prominent role, which a lot of people were not comfortable with, and they kind of thought that the author of the book, because they didn't read the book, of course, probably, but they thought that they were kind of condoning violence, and that's really not what's going on in this book. The author's not condoning violence against men who perpetrate things. She's kind of just trying to say violence against women is happening, and we need to do something more radical to change things. Not unlike the Me Too movement, which came later, or the Black Lives Matter movement, but here focusing on violence against women. This is a problem, and we need to fix it. And the people in the book see that it's not being fixed, so they take things into their own hands. So with that, let's watch this little clip. Okay, so this is from the very, I'll open that up there. This is from the very beginning of the first episode, but I do think it gives you kind of a taste of what the book is about. Okay, so I think you can see even from those just couple minutes, what this, the book is about. And you kind of get a little bit of a taste for it, no pun intended. But what I love that they do there is that cartoon of her just going around in a, just around the same 5 blocks and living in a box. I also like that they showed on TV in the background the storyline of a girl who committed suicide. But I think you can see what I mean about the violence being a little bit more prominent there with the man with the gun to his head and stuff like that. But the bigger thing is the clips of the shots of the women of in the magazines and the women writing to the magazines. If you put them together, kind of trying to be these women who are girls really who are cutting themselves and throwing up and getting hair removal and thinking about plastic surgery and worrying about a bump on their arm and all of those things, trying to live up to the ideals of the magazine. I also think that they did some really nice subtle things there. She has a full-length mirror, but it's covered up. Here in this picture, obviously we see the full mirror and her in it because it's a picture to advertise the show, but for the most part that's in her apartment. It's covered. Also taking antidepressant medication, which plays a prominent role in the story as well. So if you're interested, the show I think is on Hulu and for free and on Amazon Prime to pay. The only difficulty is that they only had 1 season, so there's a lot left up in the air. And as usual, the book is better in my opinion. So at any rate, oops, there we go. Readalikes. I almost had you guys read this book for this class, Fat is a Feminist Issue, but it's not a novel. It's a nonfiction examination by this woman, Susie Orbach, a researcher and scholar and writer and feminist from, I think it was written in the 60s or 70s, possibly. Really, I don't think that you could have Dietland without this book. She does not refer to it in the novel, but it's clear to me that some of the ideas in the book, Fat is a Feminist Issue, about that, yeah, I can't even fully articulate it here. There's a lot in that book about how fat is viewed and how women can claim their bodies for themselves and not just for how men or how others look at them. It's not long book, but there is a lot in there. And I think it's interesting to me that a lot of the ideas that she's putting forth in that book have really not been realized until recently with the body acceptance movement and HAES, healthy at every size, those kind of things. So it's something that the theories were set up about, 40 years ago, but it's just starting to come to fruition in our culture. Dumplin' is a book and also later a Netflix film about an overweight teenager and quite different than our story in some ways, but a lot of the food, weight, self-acceptance issues are also in that novel. Shrill by Lindy West. Also, a lot of these, you can see a little pattern here, became movies or TV shows. This is a memoir that's a show with Adie Bryant from Saturday Night Live. Again, a lot of the similar themes of food and weight and body size and self-acceptance. And then Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. Great book. A lot of similar themes to this book, and also a similar, I think in the TV show the tone was more like Fight Club, a little bit ironic, a little bit almost humorous in some ways. Just if you haven't read the book Fight Club, maybe you've seen the movie. The book I don't feel like has as humorous of a tone, especially if you identify with Plum and you've been through some of the same things she has. But it's certainly also a good book, and I think a great companion to this for people who are troubled by the violence in this, to ask themselves, is it because it's done by women, or is it acceptable in a thing like Fight Club to have violence there, and we celebrate that, but we don't in a book like Dietland? So good questions and good things to consider. So that is it for this very short summary, and we will come back and we'll look at some of the themes and some things to know about the book. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.